Right, welcome to Stay Humble podcast, Rebecca Marshall. How are you feeling today?
I'm okay, thank you. Yeah, not too bad given the circumstances. Yeah, not too bad.
Right, and I'm really happy that we are going to record this podcast because I feel it's something that people need right now. Obviously, as we're recording this, that lockdown point 3.0 now is happening, and a lot of
Mm.
people are obviously going to be suffering with some sort of, the anxiety and some elements of depression, particularly as well. What is a month like January? January is typically known as the blues, and particularly on the Mondays and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So to add this into people's lives as well is going to be a really difficult. And what I would like to ask is just what you think of this sort of situation coming from your job role as being a CBT expert. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's really difficult, and you're totally right. January is typically known as this is when people realise that financially they're not as stable as they maybe thought, or they've splurged on Christmas because they felt the hatch here. When again, with what's going on, there's so much pressure from every angle, and I just think we're all human and we're all really vulnerable right now. But I think what's really unique is we're all in this together, given everyone's in different circumstances, but we are all sort of in the same boat, so it's going to be really tricky for people. And I urge people to, if they're feeling like that, to just get help and talk about it.
Yeah,
I think that's why this is great.
I would agree. And I was just going to ask you, in your role, has there been much more uptake since the first lockdowns that happened in March of last year and stuff like that? Has more people come for that support in terms of, just someone to talk to about how they're feeling?
Yeah, so obviously I've been on maternity leave for the year, but I keep in very close contact with my colleagues, and there has been such a huge influx of referrals, both from primary settings where I work and secondary settings. So the sort of secondary mental health teams, they've all had such huge influx of referrals, which is really, really good because people are talking about it a little bit more, going to the GPs. But I think their lives maybe waiting times as well. So it's a catch-22. It's really good that people are getting the help and going forward for that. But the pressures of the NHS is always going to be there.
Yeah, I can imagine that as well. And what could, I wanted to kind of be a bit challenging here in terms of people's emotional state. And I wanted to just use this as a quote. So like Lao Tzu uses this, is that if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. And if you are at peace, you are living in the present. Is this something that maybe
In the
people need
present,
to sort of change their state in terms of becoming more present in terms of this situation, rather than thinking about what's happened in the past and what could be happening soon? How can we be more present at this time?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I quite like that. I've seen it a few times, and I do like that, because when people are usually really low in mood, they're often what we call ruminating, which is sort of going over old situations, their life, and just sort of stewing over that. And again, when you're quite anxious, it's all like the what ifs could happen. So what if, I get COVID? What if I get made redundant? It's all the future worries. And being present is such a hard thing to do. I don't know if you've ever tried to do sort of mindfulness and letting that thought just acknowledge that you've had that thought, but letting that go and just being mindful of what's around you and being in this moment. And it's really difficult. It does take some practice. But I do agree with that. I think it is really a good skill to have, to be present and to really just acknowledge everything that's going on, the here and now, rather than future worries or what's happened.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. And I'll be honest, I preach the sort of stuff in terms of, sort of looking at meditation or journaling and stuff like that. They're certainly things that I think people, if they want to help be more present, is certainly something I would suggest, and was going to actually sort of ask yourself, is that something that you would advocate for doing more of for people?
100%. So I think what I ask people to do, say if they're having really negative thoughts all the time, is just to write all that down and to get that out the head, because usually when you're having negative thoughts, they keep coming. But if you can just take that and then put it on a bit of paper, it's there in black and white, and you can either close it and leave it and go do something else, or you can maybe try and challenge that thought, because your thoughts aren't facts. Your thoughts are your opinions. So that's really useful. I would preach mindfulness to everybody. I think, like I've just said, it's a really good life skill to have, and it's really difficult as well. You've got to keep doing it. And I think in moments when I've been really, really stressed or worried, anxious, low, whatever, I struggle to sleep. So I will practice mindfulness to get to sleep. And I think that's really good, just to be in the here and now and letting everything go, and using your five senses, because that's a huge thing. You know, if you can use your five senses, you're being present, because you're looking at, what can I see, what can I hear, what can I smell, and you're taking your thoughts from your thoughts to the here and now.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things I would agree with, is just being able to use them five senses to help as well. I'd agree with that. And what do you think in terms of in terms of communicating and supporting others? What things would you think in terms of that as well? Like, I think there's some really good ways that we can communicate through. You know, I think that's one of the things that certainly came about in this first lockdown, was like, people said, you know, we should be more connected than ever, yet we're more distant than ever at times. And I think, what do you think in terms of creating more communication boundaries, in terms of check-ins with people, in terms of phone conversations, voice notes, or, you know, WhatsApp groups as well, you know, to help during this time?
I think it's really important, because if you think, people are in different situations, so there could be that one person somewhere on their own really struggling, and if they're in a little community bubble or a group, or that's maybe the only contact that they've had for the day, you know. And I think that's so important, because the next day they might look forward to that, or if they're feeling a certain way and someone else is maybe feeling similar, that peer support is so powerful. There's so much research about peer support and how good and sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It's just really good for people, because they're all in a similar situation, and what helps one person could help another person, and it's all about sharing experiences. And I do think it's so important right now more than ever.
Yeah, I say, I spoke to you before this, and obviously in terms of creating a support bubble for people in the previous lockdown, and certainly something like that I'm going to look at doing again this time for the people, particularly if this is going to be longer than what's maybe going to be expected, is going to be something that people may need. In terms of what I should think of in terms of other things do we need to consider? What do you think in terms of rituals as well? So for terms of morning or nighttime, because that's something that I've really picked up in certainly the last year. You know, some people may be in a situation where they're not going to work, because obviously they're either maybe having to work from home, or they're not able to do their job because their place of work is shut. What do you think in terms of morning and nighttime rituals for people, you know, instead of just staying in bed maybe? And, you know, to be fair, if it's up to people what they want to do, they may want to sit and watch Netflix, but do you think there's things where they could do each day to maybe just get themselves in a good frame of mind, really?
Yeah, and I think this is so important. I think because what's happening right now is so unusual, and we've not ever experienced anything like this in our lifetime. Human beings thrive on structure and routine. You know, it's so important from being children that we have a routine. So, and that's just embedded in us as adults. So I think I would always say, get up at the same time every day, even if you have nowhere to go, make your bed, have a shower, and eat something and drink something. If you can do that in the morning, you've achieved something already, rather than, I'm just gonna lay in bed because I'm really tired, or didn't sleep that well. I would still say, just try and get up. You know, if you can do that 5 days out of 7, that's good enough, you know, and you are going to have really down days, and that is okay too. but as long as you recognize, right, today I'm just going to chill, but tomorrow I'm back on it, and acknowledge that, because that's okay too. But really just keeping up with that routine. And I always say this, just try and do one little thing per day. And if that is just going to go to the shop to get, I don't know, for me it'd be like, a can of Diet Coke, we'll have a treat, and you've left the house, you've got fresh air, you've had a little bit of contact with people, whether it be the person at the supermarket, and coming home, you've done something. So again, it's just so important. And at night time, again, if people can't sleep, it's all, for me, I always advocate sleep hygiene. So have a routine on the night time, have your tea, have a bath if you want, read a book if you want, do the same thing every night, go to bed at the same time. And you get into a routine, and that's really helpful.
Yeah, I would totally agree in terms of the activities. I'm an advocate of all them things. And certainly something I stumbled across yesterday was about happiness. So focusing on meaningful or finding meaningful activities and building on meaningful relationships, because happiness then will take care of itself. I think that's, something as part of what's going on right now. We need to create that state of happiness.
Yeah. So there's something I use in therapy with people. So if they're quite low and I'm treating them for depression, there's something that you can Google called Valued Living Questionnaire. And what that does is sort of lists things that people typically value in life, and then you rate it 1 to 10. So for some people, like relationships might be 10. For some, it might be, I'm quite happy on my own, but friendships are 10. So it goes through work, community life, and it goes through different aspects of somebody's life, and you rate it out of 10. And then what you do is actually rate how much you're doing of that. So I could find work is, a 6. It's not, but I'll say a 6. But I'm doing 10 of that. So I'm putting more effort into work, and I don't really find it that useful than I am my friendships, and I'm doing a 2 of that when actually that's a 10. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what that does is create that thing, right? Well, I need to put work here because that's what makes me happy. So I need to put more work into my relationship. So it's building goals from that. So people are aware what they can do to change to make things a little bit happier for them in line with their values.
Yeah, I would agree on that in terms of just looking at what makes you happy and keeping to that. And how did you come about getting into cognitive behaviour therapy, can I ask, in terms of your career? Like how did that sort of come about in terms of finding that?
So I was a mental health nurse before, and I've worked in sort of forensics, and I've worked with children. And what's fascinated me is how we develop as small people. It affects us of how we are now. And I really wanted to do something that is a therapy, where nursing is great, and I loved my nursing career, but I was just sort of doing the same things, and I wanted to treat people in terms of having a treatment plan and seeing them every week, where sometimes I was seeing a child and I was in the crisis team for children, and then I wouldn't know what happened to that child, and I would really want to find out, is that person okay? Have they recovered? And I wasn't in that story, and I felt like I wanted to be the beginning, middle and end and see that recovery. And if they didn't recover, well, what could I do better, in terms of therapy? So I sort of wanted to do therapy. So I was just having a look on NHS jobs, and a trainee post came about. So I applied and got it. So that's where I'm at now, really.
Oh, that's great that you found that you wanted to help people from the beginning to the end, rather than being, sort of, like you say, sort of cut out in terms of not knowing what happened to that person, and following that through in terms of supporting people is great to see that. And I wanted to just sort of follow this up a bit again in terms of what helping people again in terms of what's going on is being able to control what they can control. The situation right now is that we can't you know, the rules that are in place are from the government, and we've just got to control them in terms of what we can do. Is that,
Yeah.
How do you think you can help people in terms of that, like just being able to control what we can control rather than worry about what's outside of our control?
That is it. So whatever we can control. So, you know, I don't watch the news anymore because it just made me angry, anxious. You know, I've just turned it off. If I need to know something, like Boris's announcement the other day, I'll find out about it, because I think that was important for me, because especially having a little girl, you know, I was like getting stressed out about childcare bubbles and this, that and the other. And I just thought, you know, I'm just going to cut that out of my life, and I felt a lot better for it. What you can control is exactly that. You can't control COVID. You can't control the lockdown. You can't control whether you're on furlough or not. Really just focus on you and what you can control, and you and your little family, or you and your little bubble, or your friendship bubble. What can you do and what can you control? And that can be loads of different things. Making sure that you get some exercise, you can control that. Making sure you go out each day, you can control that. Making sure you have 3 meals a day, you can control that. But what you can't control, just try and let that go. And that's so hard to do because it creates so much anxiety, frustration in people, and they can sit and stew on it, and it's not helpful for that person. So if you find that shift in emotion and you're getting angry or upset, frustrated, try and just let that go. As easy as that sounds, it's really difficult, but move away from it, because you can control that. So just do something else. Bit of like distraction, really. Just do something else. You can't control these things, unfortunately. I wish we could, but it's not helpful.
No, it's not. It's and like I said, that's where we lead towards a state where it would go back. Like I say, we're thinking about the past, and that's where we build the depressive state of, in terms of our emotions, or we either lead towards the future again, where we lead towards sort of a anxiety of worry as well. So we need to try and just like I say, just control what we can in terms of and doing the actions that we're required to, like I say, following the guidance that we are given. And then hopefully we will see the other side of this in terms of that. And what I wanted to sort of ask is, again, just going into sort of what things would you recommend right now for people in terms of to do in terms of activities or stuff like that they can help basically in this lockdown? You know, if you've got maybe say 3 ideas or advices that you would advise people right now to do.
My biggest thing is talk. Just talk about how you're feeling, because it's so easy just to go about your day-to-day life and keep everything in, and that creates problems in itself. If you're struggling, people would want to know, people would want to help, rather than you really struggle alone. So just please talk to somebody. If you feel that you're feeling low or anxious, you can refer yourself for therapy. That's okay. You know, that's a really strong thing for you to do. So talking is a huge one for me. Connecting, which I suppose is the same as talking really, but making sure that you have them connections with your friends or people that make you feel good. Even if you're feeling like I can't be bothered, or you're worried about how you're coming across, because we've not had any social interaction really this whole year, and that can really have an effect on someone's anxiety as well, specifically if they're socially anxious. So set yourself challenges. So if you are a bit socially anxious, right, I am going to text whoever, and try and just set one thing a day to do with that. And just getting outside. I haven't got outside really for 2 days, and I can tell. It's been rubbish weather and I just couldn't be bothered. So I need to do that and get outside, even if it's for 20 minutes, because as soon as you get back, you're feeling so much better. I don't think you'll ever regret going out or exercising, because the hormones that you create doing that is beneficial. So I don't think you'll ever regret an exercise, a workout, walking when you get back. It's doing it that's the hardest thing. So if you're really struggling, set an alarm on your phone. 10 o'clock in the morning, I am going to go for a walk. So set an alarm so it reminds you, and have your shoes and coat by the door already. So there's actually no excuse. You're down the stairs and you're there and you can see it, and then you're just out the door. So just take really little steps. And I suppose another thing, this is for, create small goals each day. And if that goal is quite big, create really little goals in the work up to that, so that you can, they're more achievable rather than a real unrealistic goal that I'm gonna run 10k. That's never going to happen, but I can walk a k and come back home again tomorrow. So make them really small but achievable, and then you'll feel a little bit better that you've done it.
I love that, because that's something I've read last year on Atomic Habits, which is a great book in terms of anyone that wants to form habits, and just setting tiny little achievable things like you mentioned there. Just simply putting your shoes at the door is a great idea. Just even if you don't put your shoes on, that's a step towards achieving that goal in terms of going for a walk, going for a run or whatever. Just little things like that are really great things in terms of goal setting and stuff like that. And I'm just going to kind of delve into this a little bit. It was one of the things I won't really go touch on, but I'll certainly think about is, like you said, don't set unachievable goals. I think with this period, again, is a period where people set you sort of your January, sort of new year, new goals. And then we'll get to this sort of point where it's 5-6 days in and people start to crack and they'll break that habit. Like you said, with the exercise thing, people probably apprehensive about doing it, but really you should be thinking about the emotion or the feeling that you get from the exercise, the endorphins and stuff like that. Goal setting is a great one that I would totally agree with, and I agree certainly with what you're saying about little steps in terms of that. And go on, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, even if you do one step towards that goal, you will feel a little bit better inside. Like, I've been putting off things, and 2 days ago I was like, right, I've got an hour here, I'm just going to do X, Y, and Z, and I felt so much better after it. But I've been avoiding it, and avoidance makes you feel guilty, and then that sets off a whole load of thoughts about yourself and feelings and behaviours, where if you can do something straight away, you'll feel a little bit better after.
Yeah, I agree. Like, say, it's that sort of apprehensiveness of, I don't know how I feel, but like, say, you've just got to throw yourself into it, and that you'll feel better for it afterwards, and you can start building them habits of them endorphins of feeling better and stuff like that. And hopefully the more time you do it again, like, say, I know it takes 66 days apparently to form a habit, but hopefully once you start keep doing them things, that will become just not even a habit really, it'll just become unconscious. And that's what
and
people
part
need
of your routine.
Yeah. So that's what we would love. I'd love people to be able to do them sort of things, is to do them unconsciously and build a daily habit thing. It'd be really great in terms of that.
Yeah.
So I definitely would agree with all three things that you said. And the other thing as well there about the social side, like we say, we are social animals. We're social animals. And for people, particularly like extroverted people, the last year, this must have been so difficult going from being out there. And I can imagine you've had a lot of people come to you about that.
Yeah. And the opposite as well, when they're socially anxious and they've not had any connection all year, and they're worried about going to Sainsbury's because of how they'll come across, or they'll do something wrong. And it's really difficult for that. And I really do empathise with people, because it's so difficult for them. Well, it's difficult for everybody, isn't it? But especially when you struggle with things like that, it's just been really hard.
Yeah, I can imagine it's challenging for everyone, the situation. And like I said, for those people that have gone from sort of either been out all the time to having to stay in, and even probably people that are introverts where they're not able to go out normally, I'm sure they'll probably already have their own anxieties as well. So it's been able to help them as well in terms of sort of with that. And with goal setting, what sort of types of things as well can I ask in terms of cognitive behavior therapy? What sort of things do you put in place for people with that?
The goals, I ask every patient that comes through my door, what do you want to get from therapy, or what do you want to get from seeing somebody or talking to somebody? And 9 times out of 10, somebody would say, I want to feel less depressed or I want to feel less anxious. Of course they would. But what I would say is, okay, well, if you wasn't as anxious as you are now, what would you be doing? And then they would say, oh, well, if we're in normal times, oh, well, I would, I'd go to the cinema, I'd go to the gym because that really freaks me out. Or if somebody's really depressed, I'll see friends because I keep cancelling on them. And I will make time for my wife or husband, and I've not really done that. So it's about, if you wasn't feeling the way you're feeling, what would you be doing? And I think it's really homing in on that. And of course, it's really difficult right now because we can't do all of them things, but things are really adaptable. So I want to be more active, right? Well, you can try and do that without the gym then. I don't want to work as much. You know, if you're self-employed and they're throwing themselves into work, right? Well, it's about creating a balance. So it's about finding what you would want to be doing. And as we've said before, make it really achievable and make it quite prolonged. So do a goal each week to work up to a bigger goal. And hopefully by the end of that, with a lot of different other things that I would have maybe done with them, they'll be on the way to that goal and feeling less depressed or less anxious, because we're testing things out all the time. So, you know, for somebody who's really anxious about going to the gym, they would be like, right, well, I'm just avoiding the gym. But they're having all these thoughts about, well, I don't know how to work equipment. I will look stupid. People are going to look at me when I'm on the cross trainer and they'll think, what am I doing here? They'll have all these really negative thoughts. But when at the moment, we're not challenging any of them, because if you challenge them, you know that they're not true, but we're not in that at the minute. So it's just about, right, well, how can you go and challenge these thoughts that you're having as well? So I'm just going to go out for a walk and see who actually looks at me, or do things like that and just challenge whatever's happening.
Yeah, I can imagine that's really difficult for people in that situation. Obviously, there's a fear of people's opinion in terms of, you know, that's something that I've come across lately, is like people obviously fearing the opinion of others in terms of, you know, like you said there, where they're fearing of going to the gym because what's so-and-so going to think, when really you shouldn't care. You know, why care? Why worry about them things? They've got their own worries to worry about. Like, be present with it and not think about what they think, because they've got their own million things that they're really bothered about. They're not bothered about what you're doing there. So I think that's...
You've hit the nail right on the head, and that's what I asked people, because I was like, well, what you're thinking about now, I wonder what they're thinking about, because it's probably not anything to do with you. And it's getting people to think like that because they're believing them thoughts 100% to be true. And actually, you're totally right. They've got their own things going on, probably haven't even noticed yet, and you need to crack on with that and be present. You're totally right.
Like I say, I think there's a real... I don't know if this has come about because of social media more now than ever, because, like I say, I think we maybe would have feared people's opinion, maybe of parents or of friends, maybe, or stuff like that. But now I think it's even more, say because of a following online and stuff like that. That's become certainly a creator of anxiety or of things like that, you know, like in terms of that.
Yeah, huge. And the amount of kids that I saw at the crisis team because of that, and their self-esteem through the boots, you know, it's not, it can be a really useful, healthy option for people, but it's also really, really unhealthy if you are looking at all these unrealistic people and lifestyles, because we put on Instagram what we want people to see. We don't put on, you know, no makeup and crap aspects of your lives, and it's about remembering that. But it's really, really hard for people to challenge that.
Yeah, I can imagine. And does that come about from an education point of view? Do you feel like that there's not enough taught in terms of dealing with them things a little bit, in terms of, because obviously they ended up coming through crisis teams because of maybe that's not been helped in that sense, if that makes...
Yeah, I think a bit of both. It's what they've grown up with now, I guess.
Yeah,
the youngsters now, and that's quite normal. But yeah, I don't think there's enough education around mental health in schools, especially, like, a lot of pressure is on kids now, and adults and everybody. There's so much more pressure on people, and under that pressure, we all crack at some point, but do we know how to deal with that? Do we know how to deal with stress? Do we know how to talk about it? Do we know how to do these different things to make us feel a little bit better and reduce that stress? It's not been taught. And I think that is so important for people, that more awareness around what to do is key.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Certainly, maybe in some of the settings, I do know that they do have emotional learning support. Certainly in the setting I work in and stuff like that, there is that in place. And I'd like to think that that's going to become much more. It's just going to happen. More work is going to evolve in that. Certainly going forward in schools, I'd like to think that there's going to be some sort of direction with that. And I'd like to ask you in terms of the future. I know it's really hard to sort of, especially like looking into the future, but how do you see the future going for yourself in terms of working in your setting?
I think we're going to get busier. There's going to be more pressure, but as I said right at the beginning, that's a good thing because more people are going to be talking about how they feel. And I think that is the great thing about social media is people talk about the mental health a little bit more than they maybe did 10 years ago. And that's then triggered, oh, actually, I'm not learning this. Maybe I should sort myself out as well. And maybe I should go speak to somebody. So I think it's going to get busier, but for a good reason. And things like this help tenfold because the conversations happening about mental health and it's on TV, and especially with lockdown. And it's just skyrocketed, hasn't it? People's emotions and emotional states. So I just think it's going to be busy, but it's going to be a good thing.
Like I admitted on my last podcast that I've gone to see someone regarding cognitive behavior therapy a couple of times, and I just said, just being able to speak to someone that you don't know, that's a stranger, like I say, in some sort, like to create sort of social groups in terms of accountability groups, being able to just share how you're feeling and stuff, just to get it off your chest is enormous. And sometimes you might not even know what that other person on the other side might be able to offer advice. They might have some great advice if you just share it and be open about that.
Yeah, and I think it is hard for people to be open, some people to be open about that, but like you say, you just don't know what that other person will say, and that's the beauty of peer support, because they might have gone through what you're going through and have a right gem of information for you, and you can try it.
Yeah, I would agree. And I've just got a couple of final questions to ask you to finish off, Rebecca.
Yeah,
the first one is, what does it mean to be human? What does
it mean to be human? That we all have complex emotions, but those emotions are amazing. We can learn from really horrible emotions, and we can learn from it and develop from it and become stronger. But also we have really good, beautiful emotions, love, all these happiness, excitement. We have a range of emotions, but actually every single emotion is beneficial for us. Even the crap, horrible ones, we learn from it and we become stronger.
Yeah,
that sounded quite deep, didn't it?
It was very, it's very deep, but it's certainly something like I've been the last couple of days I've been on a course where that's covered emotions and understanding the importance of them, and I think that they are important to people in terms of just unraveling them really, and that's really I think that's really good in terms of what being human is. And finally, I'd like to just ask is what keeps you humble or stay humble?
What keeps me humble? I think what keeps me humble is waking up every morning and seeing my little girl and just thinking everything's fine, everything is okay and it will be. And just having a nice cup of tea in the morning, that makes me really humble.
Oh, that's really nice. That's really great. And what I'd like to do now is just sort of give you a platform for people to basically reach out to you, if they feel that they want a bit more further support, where do they need to do, what do they need to come to in terms of doing that?
So I think if you are a Hull, got a Hull GP, you can access counselling via Let's Talk, and they offer, counselling, CBT, couples therapy, I think they offer a range of different things. So just Google Let's Talk, and I think you can do an online referral. You don't even have to speak to somebody, and then they will arrange somebody to ring you back. If you have an East Riding GP, you ring my team, which is the Emotional Wellbeing Service. They will take your details and then get you an assessment booked fairly sharpish, to be honest. If you are in crisis, you can ring Rapid Response. So if you feel at really risk and quite scary and things like that, you can ring Rapid Response, which is 01482 301 701, I think. But please Google that because my memory's shocking. And you can also have private therapy if you didn't want to wait for that. But just please look for somebody that's BABCP registered. That means it's a governing body, because people can do a 2-day CBT course and say that they're delivering CBT. So just please do your research and see that person is under a governing body, and you can pray for private therapy as well. And you can also follow me on Instagram if you want. I'm Humber CBT.
That's really great. Yeah, that's really great, that all the information, and I'll certainly put in the podcast notes and in the basically on any of the social media posts as well. So I'll make sure that they're in there, because I just think they're such important information for people right at this time. And I just want to thank you for coming on and having this conversation with me. It's something I've really wanted to talk about on my podcast and basically help people at this time more than ever. So I'm really appreciative of your time and for what you've provided in this podcast. I'm really thankful for that, Rebecca.
No, and thank you for everything you're doing, because it sounds great and you create an awareness, and that's what's really, really needed and really important. So thank you for having me.